A rational exponent is an exponent that is a fraction. And what a rational exponent actually means is the numerator is a power of whatever that expression is, and the denominator is actually just the index of a root. So this fractional exponent actually just means an nth root of a to the m power. Now that could be written with the power inside the radical or outside the radical like we have it here. Either one is proper. Sometimes it's easier to evaluate it if you have it on the inside. Sometimes it's easier to evaluate if you have it on the outside. So first thing we're going to do is rewrite a few expressions that have rational exponents as radicals. So we have 5 to the 3/4 power. So I would go ahead and write my radical there because I've got a rational exponent. The base of the exponential expression there is the radicand that goes inside the radical. The numerator is the power. So I'm going to go ahead and put this whole thing in parentheses and put a 3 on the outside there. And then the denominator of your rational exponent is your index. So this would be the 4th root of 5 to the 3rd power. Looking at the second one there, I've got a -3 to the 7/5 power. So once again, I do have a I have a rational exponent. So I'm going to rewrite that as a radical. Okay, so starting with my radical here, the base of the exponential expression is my radicand, so -3 on the inside of the radical. The top number of my exponent is a power. So I'm going to go ahead and put this whole thing in parentheses and put that 7 on the top. And the bottom number is the index. So I'm going to put 5 there. And that last one there, the 14 to the 1/2 power. Again, the exponent is a fraction. So that means I can write it as a radical. So I'm going to go ahead and put my radical there. The base is the radicand. The top number is the exponent. Now an exponent of 1 is understood if you don't write it, so I'm not going to write it. The bottom number is my index number, so my denominator of my exponent there, that's the index of my radical. Now an index of 2 is just a square root. So that means I don't have to write that 2 either. I could just write this as square root of 14 like it is right there. Okay, next up, we're going to rewrite radicals as rational exponents. So we're going to go the opposite direction. So now I have the 6th root of 4 to the 5th power. So the radicand is going to be the base. The power is going to be my numerator of my exponent. And the index is going to be my denominator. So this would be the same as 4 to the 5/6 power. For my second one there, I've got the the square root of 5 to the 5th power. So the 5 radicand is my base. The 5 power is my numerator of my exponent. And then the denominator has to be the index of this radical. Now this one is a square root. There's no number written there as an index, so that's understood to be an index of 2. My third one on there, I've got the 3rd root of -9. So -9 is my base. I'm going to put it in parentheses because the negative needs to be affected also. The power is the numerator. There's no power written there, so I know that it's understood to be a 1. And then the denominator is the index from my radical, so that would be a 3. Okay. Sometimes rewriting it in the other notation makes it easier to evaluate. So we're going to evaluate a few of these expressions here without using a calculator. So I've got 27 to the 1/3 power. So first thing I want to do is rewrite that as a root, because that may make it easier to think about. So I'm going to go ahead and write my radical because I do have a fractional exponent. The 27 is my radicand, so that goes inside. 1 is the power, the numerator is the power, so I don't have to write that. The denominator is my index for my root, so that's a 3. So now I need to figure out what the third root of 27 is. So that would be what times itself 3 times gives me 27, and that would be a 3. So 27 to the 1/3 power is just 3. Or 16 to the 3/2 power. Again, since the exponent is a radical, since the exponent is a fraction, I can rewrite it as a radical. The base is going to be my radicand. The numerator is going to be a power. So I'm going to go ahead and put 3 there. And the denominator is my root, and that one's a 2. So that's a square root, which means I don't need to write that 2. Now to evaluate this one, it would be easiest if I evaluate the square root of 16 first. So the square root of 16, what times itself 2 times gives me 16. That would be a 4. And then I can raise 4 to the 3rd power. So that's 4 times itself 3 times. So 4 times 4 is 16. 16 times 4 is 64. So 16 to the 3/2 power is 64. And then finally, we have negative 64 to the negative 2/3 power. Now this time I've got a negative base and I have a negative power, so I have to deal with both of those things. I'm going to deal with that negative power first. Now, we have dealt with negative powers at some point this year, so this is just a quick reminder. If I have a to the negative n power, well, that means the same thing as 1 over a to the positive n power. So that negative power really just means take the reciprocal or put it under 1, and that'll make your power positive. So I'm going to start with that. So I'm dealing with this negative power first. So that means I would say 1 over negative 64, and then that'll make the power positive, so to the 2/3 power. So now I can deal with this. The denominator still has a fractional exponent, so I'm going to rewrite it as a radical. I've got my radical. Negative 64 is my radicand. That's a 4. The numerator is the power, so my power is a 2. The denominator is my root, so my root is a 3, my third root. And this would be easiest to evaluate if I do the root first. So I'm going to do the third root of negative 64. So what times itself 3 times would give me a negative 64. Now, first of all, it is possible to get a negative multiplying by itself 3 times. A negative index number, it's possible to do a negative. Odd index number, possible to do a negative. So I'm going to say negative 4. Notice it's still under 1 also. I haven't forgotten to write that numerator portion. So now I just need to figure out negative 4 squared. So negative 4 times itself, that would be a positive 16. So this negative 64 to the negative 2/3 power would be the same as 1/16. Now you answer the questions on the Google form.